Hey everyone, this is Pan Ban Richard presenting to you AC Radio at www.abyssalchronicles.com, where Tales is our life. This episode is for Sunday, August 12th, 2018, as I'm joined here by AC Radio co-host Dimension Slip, as we essentially are just taking this time to just talk about one of our favorite Tales games each. And for myself, I'm going to be talking about Tales of Innocence R, and for Slip, she's going to be talking about Surprise, Tales of the Abyss. So, I mean, I kind of have a lot to ask about that for you with regards to that game altogether. But first off, we're going to be beginning with the Tales of Innocence R. And before I begin with the overview of that game, out of curiosity, Slip, how much do you know about that game offhand?
Not much actually. I just know a little about Luca, whatever his however you pronounce his name. A bit of his quirks, I guess he's a little insecure, that sort of deal, and a little background, he was studying before he got taken into this grand adventure. Oh, and Conway hates tomatoes.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. And he's kind of similar in personality to Jade, sort of, but not really. Sort of, kind of, but not really. So that's all I know about Innocence.
Yeah, he kind of is, but his snark isn't really. It's more subtle in a sense. But to go a little bit further with regards to Tales of Innocence, for a quick overview of the game, Tales of Innocence was initially released in 2007 on the Nintendo DS, right after whatever Tales of the Tempest was, and then in 2012 it got a remake on the PlayStation Vita, which started the whole reimagining series for that platform. Kinda, I'm gonna talk more about that later on, but generally speaking, it was developed by Alpha Systems on the DS and Seventh Chord, an outsourced company on the PlayStation Vita. And both games featured a 3D linear motion battle system, Tales of Innocence being the first one. Well, not really the first one, but okay, the first one was technically Tempest, but it still used the Tales of Rebirth 3-laned system. It's the first Mothership 3D title on a portable console. In the DS version, you had to worry about 3 characters in your party, whereas the Vita version, you had to worry about the traditional 4-character party. And as we've mentioned, it stars Luca, who is a little bit mild, timid, and sort of has his own coming of growth story. The usual thing that you see from other tales, not even just other tales of titles, just general stories within the genre that are relative to the coming of growth story. But it does go into a very intriguing premise with this plot and setting, as it's all about discovering past selves, like reincarnations, because they were reincarnations of characters in the past that were more so generals and more of a mythological style back in the day, but then they've been reincarnated to an area that's more so steampunk. So Luca, he literally right at the beginning of the game, he starts having dreams of the commander Asras, and essentially that sort of guides him forward into his journey alongside other people who are also reincarnations, where he draws strength within his reincarnated, within his original self, who was Asras the commander. It was literally started at the beginning of the game, and to go on forward from there, it's just more so about how the reincarnated selves are being hunted down by this other group that's basically gathering them all together for a specific cause.
I see. I think I remember that much, kind of, because I played a little through Innocence, but not the Vita version. I just ended up until the first dungeon, and I stopped because I had to return my friend's DS that time. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So Tales of Innocence R, when I was first introduced to that game, it was during a sale that occurred in 2014 on the Japanese PSN store. So I splurged on a couple of titles like Tales of Fantasia, Tales of Innocence R, and I believe Rebirth and Destiny 2 were a part of that splurge as well. But I just finished Tales of Exilia 2 at the time, and I wanted to move on to a different game. And I thought, well, why not play one of the games that were on sale? And I remember seeing videos online featuring Tales of Innocence R's battle system, so I just thought I'd give Innocence R a shot. And one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite Tales of titles is, in fact, this battle system. Now, I know that plenty of people do appreciate the forward movements that Tales of is taking with the chain capacity system and all that, and I've been okay with it, but I was introduced to the series when Tales of Symphonia came out. So I kind of got to the whole, we all know the camps with Team Symphonia and Team Destiny once Destiny R came out. Um, I likened myself to titles like Tales of Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss and even Tales of Fantasia on the GBA, and I kind of grew to appreciate the whole, essentially like the TP management style. And like a part of that that sort of like comes to mind is that when I'm playing like the more modern titles like Tales of Graces, Tales of Exilia 2, I was thinking like these are fine. Like I'm okay with playing with them as Tales of games, but I just felt like I never really actively thought this while I was playing through those games, but in the back of my mind, I felt like there was something missing. And then when I was doing my playthrough of Tales of Innocence R in 2015, one thing that came to mind that really clicked with me is that halfway through the game, when I was playing through the game, I just felt like I had this thought that crossed my mind that I never felt for some time, where I just felt like I was playing an actual Tales of game again. And by actual, I mean more so to say that a Tales of game that I'm familiar with, because the gameplay takes the traditional HP and TP system that previous Tales of games are well known for, and even expands on it further. And it promotes it promotes strong gameplay and teamwork within your party, like more so the actual collaboration of teamwork, the result of teamwork, as opposed to like something like the link system where or the armatization where it looks like you are doing teamwork, where in actuality you're just pressing one button over and over again in a sense. To go further from that, because the system that Tears of Innocence R introduces is the rave system. And the rave system, where it's like a gauge at the top left corner when you're battling, is that when you maintain a high hit count, you'll gain bonuses in four different tiers. So you can get a plus 10% health, or I think I might be screwing up the bonuses, but you get everybody restores 10% of their health, or everybody you get an additional like attack rate, or everybody's TP gets a minor boost as well if you go to like say 50 hits or 60 hits. And it also introduces the counter system that Tales of Hearts R has as well, where like when you counter a specific flash attack at a certain time when you press the guard button, like it continues your combo. And I felt like that was a great balance of like people who have like comments about how the previous Tales of games were all about just, oh, you just gotta like rack a high combo and that's it. Like, yeah, I can see that argument coming to fruition, but at the same time, like that introduction of the whole counter system still promotes high level play, because like the opponent has a chance to counter your combo, and you have to time your button press at the right moment in order to maintain your combo or lose it. And that's what I really liked about playing through Innocence R.
I see. So it's like you really have to I'm not sure if strategize is the right word, but you really need to pay attention to everything that's going on if you want to get that high combo. And I guess it feels very rewarding if you're able to maintain it. Is it?
Yes, no, that's exactly right. Because I remember when I like fought bosses that are like these huge creatures and all that, and I'm like thinking, oh no, I'm kind of getting low on TP. Wait a second, Kongwai's in the background casting a spell. Well, I'll let him cast a spell, and then I could stop my combo, and then like heal my TP, and then I could like continue on going from there. And then it's just like moments like that where you have to pay attention to what your party members are doing and what your enemy is doing. It's very rewarding at the end of the day. And a part of me that kind of feels like it could have been a thing is that I kind of wish that it was released on a main console as opposed to a portable, because I was playing it on the Vita TV and I was like thinking, man, this game would be a lot of fun to play with like other friends and all that. It's like, oh wait, it's actually a Vita game and it's only single player. And I don't know, I loved Innocence Arc because it reminded me why I love the Tales of series, because of the whole party dynamics where everybody collaborates together in real time in order to accomplish the common goal, which is beating the much more difficult foe in front of you.
Interesting. It kind of sounds like an MMO in that respect. I mean, the level of coordination between the party members, I mean, at least like trying to maintain the combo and the teamwork aspect, that's Interesting.
Yeah, and like it also reminds me of like why I loved playing Tales of Symphonia and why I love playing Tales of the Abyss. It's because whenever I would like break out that title, like the one of the major factors for me is why Tales of like rings true to me is the multiplayer potential. And I remembered I would always break out Tales of Symphonia and I would play with my cousins or play with my friends, and then they would be like the spellcasters. It's like, all right, hold on to that spell until I'm done this combo, then activate it. And then they activate it. It's like, all right, now I can keep going with the combo, and then they get knocked down, and I do my unison attack, and then it's just, there's just so much to it where it's like, the coordination I felt was kind of a little bit lacking, I felt, in recent titles where, well, aside from Tales of Berseria, there's games like Tales of Exilia, Exilia 2, and Zestiria where it felt like it was more so they were presenting to you the visual of coordination, whereas you're actually coordinating, if that kind of makes sense.
Oh yes, I agree because it's like when I tried playing multiplayer for Hysteria and Berseria, it was kind of hard to see what was going on in the screen for one. And another is like I just felt like I was doing my own thing and my friend was doing her own thing and we weren't really cooperating properly, that sort of deal. But we still managed to beat the bosses because it's just very hack and slash sort of deal.
Yeah, and I'm also going to address this right now. If you like the games that we're sort of like nitpicking on, that's all right because honestly, the reason why we nitpick is because we care about the series, and a part of it that comes to mind is like if you enjoy it, then that's what makes you an individual. That's what makes you who you are. You're all right to like things that we don't like, and vice versa. So, I mean, I still don't mind the Exilias, but it's just more so that I remember breaking out Tales of Exilia with my friends, and we're like, all right, let's beat this one boss. It's like this flying bird anomaly, and we were having such a tough time fighting it and taking it down. And because we all wanted to control our characters, and then literally halfway through the fight, it's like, all right, in order for us to beat this boss, we're gonna have to link with you. So that means you're just gonna have to put the controller down and watch your character be controlled by the AI as we actually take down this opponent altogether. And I like the linking. Okay, I like the linking system because it's promotes single player play, but then for multiplayer, it just doesn't really mesh well. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess like at the end of the day, like to reel it back to Tales of Innocence R, like it reminded me how much I missed that collaboration within the party members, and that's when like halfway through the game is why I felt like I was playing. I had that reaction of feeling like I was playing an actual Tales of game again because, or a Tales of game that I'm familiar with because of how all the party members like mesh well and collaborate with each other because they both excel in spells and their own like fighting forms as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think I get what you mean, even if I haven't played Innocence. But yeah.
And to go forward from that, like something that also comes to mind too is that like every character like can be combat oriented or spell oriented because they all have like elemental spells, and at the same time they also have like particular combat styles that make them all different amongst themselves. Like Luca is just your standard your sword wielder, but he has like sword moves that can sort of like keep him like in the air, which is kind of cool because like he's this like timid boy with like this huge sword, yet you see him like spinning all around all over the place with like all these aerial arts and all that. And Spada can also do that too, but he's more so like also a bit of like the Lloyd in the party. Well, besides the two swords, he's also like very fast, and he also has a bit of like lightning elements to his arts as well, which is really cool. And then Hermana is kind of like the your usual fist fighter, but there's just so much variety to it. And oh geez, like Iria, like her long range like arts as well with like Ricardo with the guns that they use. Like there's just so much variety to how like you can explore with all the characters and all that. It's just it kind of like promotes that whole collaboration aspect because each character on their own has their strengths and their weaknesses, and when they all collaborate with each other, they cover each other's weaknesses in order to defeat the common goal in front of them. So to go further from that, like I can talk about the gameplay about Innocence R like all day. It just like it really resonated in me how much I missed that sort of like gameplay in modern titles, and I do hope that whatever Bandai Namco pushes forward with for the future would sort of reflect that gameplay. But some other highlights for me included the soundtrack, which was produced by a newcomer really in the Tales of series at the time. It wasn't Shinji Tamura. It wasn't Motoi Sakuraba. It wasn't even Go Shina. It was somebody by the name of Kazuhiro Nakamura. And he only worked on Tales of Innocence, Tales of Innocence R, and Tales of Hearts R. And it was nice to have a refreshing change of pace and direction on the OSTs because when you went into an environment, it kind of felt like it contributed more to the ambiance of the setting that you're in. Like I remembered when I went to the ice world, it had like some more chimes and more of a soothing sound to it. And yeah, you can get that in some of the previous titles as well, but I guess I'm just more so saying that it felt like the direction of the OST in Tales of Innocence R had a bit of a more so old school feel to it, for lack of a better term. And to even talk about that further, like the battle songs, we all know about Breakthrough with the Sword. It's the first battle theme that's introduced in Tales of Innocence, and that's like the one theme that everybody seems to like refer to. But there are like other themes in there that definitely shine, like the second theme that you get in Tales of Innocence R, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you missed Breakthrough the Sword, but that theme is not that bad too, and I kind of like have a bit more of a higher appreciation of it compared to Breakthrough the Sword. And there's also the boss themes. They're just also unique, and like I would recommend to give the soundtrack a bit of a listen when you find the time if you want something different from the usual Sakuraba or Tamura contributions.
Teal soundtracks tend to be um interesting, so yeah, maybe sometime I would I'll give it a listen. In terms of like soundtrack, I am kind of familiar with the ending theme. It was really good, and the opening theme was also really good. I actually have to find an Tales opening. I'm not very into, but yeah, it was really good, and the ending kind of stood out to me because I actually heard it first from an AMV. It's AMV material, basically.
The opening theme, "Fall the Nightingale," is still probably one of my top favorite tales of openings in the entire franchise, and it definitely keeps up the whole like upbeat aspect of the of like everything just really comes to fruition. Like the action that you see in the anime cutscenes and the animations just like sort of like mesh well with the different parts of that song. Um, the Innocence R opening, I it's okay, but it at the end of the day for me it doesn't really hold a candle to Follow the Nightingale. But I can still see it hitting a soft spot for fans. And speaking of soft spots, the ending theme of Tales of Innocence are say good goodbye, good night. Um, I have a bit of a soft spot for that as well because when I was first really into the whole news writing thing for Abyssal Chronicles, like Tales of Innocence was the first game that I was like following vividly, and I remember they always play that song at the end of every trailer, and I'm like, yeah, I felt the nostalgia when they played that credits theme in Innocence R, like in 2015. But overall, like definitely give the OST of Tales of Innocence R a listen when you can, because it definitely has like a lot of like it's a different take compared to like other OSTs that you've heard in the past in this franchise. And to go on to the third point, something that also I do like in the game is its plot. And while the plot does feel like somewhat of like your standard coming of age story, like the one thing that I really do like about it is its setting. And it's nice to see Tales of games actually take risks and step out of the usual oh, it's just a mystical world kind of like um, setting, like what you normally expect in like a JRPG. Whereas in this case, like Tales of Innocence takes the setting into sort of like a bit of a steampunk era. So you see like trains and you see like all this all these particular vehicles that rely on steam together, and you their outfits reflect this as well. And I do like how it presents that while still maintaining a sort of like traditional tales of plot line in a sense, and it does like reign like a bit of a uniqueness in its identity. So like games that do that besides Innocence includes like Zesteria, where it went to the whole like Arthurian style, or Tales of Exilia 2, where it made it a bit more modern. I do really like that about how Innocence like maintained that setting. And one final thing to sort of like go on about that is that The real interesting thing about Innocence R was the whole like Triverse tease. To those who don't know, there was like something that Bandai Namco was teasing around the time that Tales of Innocence R came out, because there was Tales of Innocence, Tales of Hearts, and Tales of the Tempest that were all released on the DS, and something that was teased in Tales of Innocence R is that they were trying to make them all into a connected world. So, like for example, there were some images in Tales of Innocence R that you would unlock in its X dungeon where it would show like the weapons from Tales of Hearts, like all the Spurias and all that. And it would even show like an image of both Caius and Rubia on a bridge too. And not only that, like one of the bosses in Tales of Innocence R is like a one of the beasts from Tales of the Tempest as well. So it's kind of like nice how that game was sort of like trying to like make connections between the three games, and we got that in Tales of Hearts R, but it sort of like fell off the cliff after Tales of Hearts R, because I presume that the sales didn't really go too well for that game, for both games, I presume. And then like basically speaking, it just never really like came to fruition, the whole Tempest R that we were all waiting for at the end of the day.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, and like it also like keeps in mind how like we had those extra characters like QQ, like Kongwai, like Gull, how all three of them had like some sort of like connection in this Triverse gate, and it was like it brought a lot of intrigue for the entire franchise, and then like it just sort of like fell off the cliff because after the Exilias and Tales of Hearts R, they just focus all their resources besides the mobile games on Tales of Zestiria, and that's understandable due to all the like the staff shifts and everything. But it kind of leaves it hanging, it's just unfortunate because like it feels like they just left it there without actually putting an exclamation point on that whole Triverse at the end of the day, because we all know that Tempest requires that remake, at least because like I also hear things too where people who talk about Tempest, like they sort of like started warming up to it, and I felt like Tempest R would have been like a great revival for that game, because that was the game that caused the whole like escort and mothership split in the first place. So it would have been a nice comeback story for that title, I find. So overall, when it comes to Tales of Innocence R, like I love its battle system. It's pretty much what reminded me why I love the Tales of series. And its OSC is also pretty different, so something to look into. And I love the setting of the steampunk era and all that. And the characters really gel well with each other at the end of the day. So it's a very solid title with a very solid gameplay system, I find. So moving on from Tales of Innocence R, let's move on to Tales of the Abyss. So that's something that you obviously is one of your favorites, Slip. Would you like to give a brief overview of that game for those who may not know about it?
All right. Okay, I'm just gonna read from the wiki because I am totally very uncreative. So basically, Tales of the Abyss is a role-playing video game developed by Namco's Tales Studio as the eighth main title in the Tales series. Originally released for the PlayStation 2, the game was published by Namco in Japan in December 2005 and Bandai Namco Games in North America in October 2006. So, okay, I'm just gonna. The Its development team included director Yoshihito Higuchi, producer Makoto Yoshizumi, and the character artist Kosuke Fujishima. The game features music by series composers Motoi Sakuraba and Shinji Tamura, and includes the opening theme song Karma by Bump of Chicken. Namco has given Tales of the Abyss the characteristic genre name to know the meaning of Once Birth RPG. And the port for the Nintendo 3DS was released in Japan in June 2011, followed by an Australian and European release in November 2011 and a North American release in February 2012. It's the first game to feature a linear motion battle system that implements free run across the plane and uses TP for its actions, which last sentence I added myself anyway. But so in terms of the plot, it takes place in a very fantasy world. And focuses on Luc von Fabre, who is a young swordsman who's a very sheltered noble, and his life turns upside down when he kind of becomes the target of gets embroiled in a conflict involving the Order of Lorelei, which is basically the story's military slash powerful religious organization. And um, the story basically revolves around him discovering the truth and significance of his own birth and unraveling the mysteries behind his world and the prophecy known as the scores, that sort of deal. I also mentioned the 3DS port because that's actually how I got um, introduced to Abyss in the first place. It wasn't through the PS2 um, console where it first came out.
Yeah, and I remember you also bringing up that the 3DS version wasn't just how you were introduced to Abyss, but that's also how you were introduced to the entire series, right?
Yes, that's why Abyss is like one of my favorites ever because I do have some sort of emotional attachment to it because it's what brought me into the series in the first place. But the circumstances in which I actually got into Abyss was kind of funny because I actually was dared into trying Tale of the Abyss because I just remembered I was in a Skype chat with two of my friends and they were like, "Hey, you should try Tales of the Abyss sometime if you have a 3DS," because they asked me if I have a 3DS and I said, "My sister does," and they were like, "You should try it." And I was like, why should I try it? And they were like, "Oh, you're gonna like Tyr and Jade." They were like, so they were like that, and they're like, I don't know who they are, but okay, I'll give it a try. And yeah, I ended up borrowing my siblings' 3DS, and the rest was basically history, I guess. So I started with the 3DS version, and while it did feel like it's supposed to be a console game in a lot of ways because it was the screen was really tiny, so I can barely see like character expressions sometimes, and the save points were really spaced out in a sense. So I mean, the way they were spaced out didn't feel like the way they would typically space out save points in a mobile game. In a mobile, I mean, in like a handheld console. Like they felt like um they were spaced out for if you were had all the time to sit in front of a PS2 and play through things, the sort of deal.
Yeah.
But I mean, the nice thing about having portable consoles, you can just put it to sleep and go back to it in case you don't get to a save point. Though you have to pray that your battery doesn't run out. I thankfully haven't had any close shaves with the battery, so all was well in this pseudo save kind of deal. Anyway, so in terms of why I really like Abyss, I think the main thing would be the storytelling for the most part because um I really appreciate stories that um make an effort to what they call this, put you into the um point of view character's shoes. And for Abyss, I think they really did a good job doing that. I mean, like when you start out in the story, you're like just as unaware and of what's going on as Luke is. Like, what the heck is a score? What the heck is a phone master ion? And the sort of, I mean, yes, I mean it's they throw a lot of concepts to you the first time you play it, and you're all like, "What? What's a phone on? What's an order of Lorelei?" Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's very confusing at first, but as you go through the story, things start to make a lot more sense, and the questions that you had at the beginning start to get answered in time, and it's really good. They made good on how to do that, and what makes it even sweeter is if you do a replay of the game, some of the what the other characters say start to take on a different note because of your foreknowledge of what the things are. And I think it's amazing that they were able to add like that extra flavor in case you do a new game. So yeah, I'll stop at that before I get into spoiler territory.
I definitely see what you mean with the whole having Luke being confused about like a lot of things, because they really did set that up properly. They set that up pretty well with regards to how Luke can be a little bit more identifiable for the player, like the player character concept that we generally brought up previously with Legendia and other games. Because of how Luke is so confused about everything, then it just sort of like answers the player's questions about, oh, why is this that and why is that this? But I guess like that also comes into mind with how like his personality may not be as identifiable because of how grading it may be initially, but like you said, when you play through the game and you look back at it, then you understand why he behaves the way that he is.
Exactly. Um, and in relation to the storytelling, yeah, there's basically Luke's journey throughout the game. And in relation to that, the characters, like more, I mean, in all of the games that I've played, this cast was the one that felt like the most relevant to the plot. Like each of them had some sort of role to play in them, and none of them felt extraneous or totally extra just because they needed like six characters in the party, um, type of deal. So everyone felt like they kind of earned that spot. I mean, in some sort of sense of the word, yeah. So
Out of curiosity, what are some games that come to mind where you feel like the party members don't really contribute as much?
Exilia, for however much I love it, like for one thing, I might draw flack for this, but like Leia in the story didn't feel as relevant. I mean, she's very important to Jude's growth, but like after and her banter with like Agria was also pretty interesting, but she didn't really feel that as relevant as like the other characters. And and for the most part, like Elise kind of also tapered off in terms of relevance. Like there was a point in time where I, well, without going to spoilery territory, like they could have just I guess let her be out of the party at some point, but they still stuck her because I guess the cast needed like maybe gender balance or a spellcaster or sort of deal.
I see. That can definitely be something that we can discuss more about in an Exilia topic. But so you see that you find that the cast like meshes well for you in Abyss.
Yes, because like if you're the type who just wants more plot, or I don't know, just wants to see like where the story goes, like the party you have is kind of enough to push everything, and each of them like have their own way in how it moves, and like what input they have is really important, that sort of deal. Luke and Tyr are very plot important pieces. Jade is a military commander whose influence is kind of more than it seems, and Natalia is like the princess of her kingdom. And Guy and Anis might not look that much at first, but yeah, they have their own importance too, I feel.
I
Yes.
remember there was like a lot of discussion about Annis in particular because um, if did you want to mention any more highlights before we go into any spoiler talk? Because we can definitely discuss that later
Okay.
if you like.
All right. For yes, because a lot of the things I like about the Beast actually delve into spoilery territory, but in but before that, I guess one highlight is also the OST for me. Like I know a lot of people complain about Sakuraba being a little redundant or whatever, but whatever the case is, the arrow is shot is a very good battle theme, as is Never Surrender. And what they call this, the God General theme is really really good too. Oh gosh, what was the title?
Awkward Justice.
Yes, Awkward Justice. It's really good, and this isn't Sakuraba anymore, but when they throw in like um stuff like the meaning of birth is really good too, and it just the feeling it evokes is just I don't have words to describe it.
I
Feels
I gotcha. I gotcha.
probably the best. Crimson Pride is also one of my favorite tracks in the series too, and Karma. Like I'm not sure if Tales of the Abyss would be the first, or if there were other games that tried to employ like their opening theme as like a lead motif for various tracks in the game. Because whenever they do that like for Abyss, it really drives home the right feeling for me.
It's definitely a trope that did exist in previous Tales of games. I think it showed up in Eternia, Rebirth, and I think Symphonia as well. So it's kind of like a traditional Tales of thing that
I see.
Abyss did go for with Karma, but I think it sort of had a bit more of a attachment to it because I believe, like what you mentioned with the meaning of birth, they did have a very good build up to the eventual use of that theme, as it's only used once in the entire game. And besides Rebirth, I think Abyss was also the title that uses the opening theme in its battle theme as well, which sort of like had more of an impact because Abyss was the first one that was localized, so it had more of an audience to hear that too.
I see. I see. And yeah, in terms of tracks, like the look of that day still, evokes that similar nostalgic feel that I think it intended to evoke. So yeah.
There's also I don't know if that's the theme that you're talking about, like the very end, like the credits,
Yes.
like
Yes.
the final theme there. Like I always think about this whenever I look back at Abyss, as for the plot, where I feel like there were some hits and some misses for me. I will still have a bit of a soft spot for the ending, and a part that has to do with like the theme as well, because it gets pretty corny in a sense, like near the end. But I mean, it's just like, well, all right. Like I remember back when I was like in my teen years when I played Tales of the Abyss when it came out. I was so engrossed by the plot because of how much it had that corny ending. And then when I replay it nowadays, I'm like, yeah, geez, this is so corny, but I can still sort of like understand how I felt about it. Like it's a guilty pleasure, for lack of a better term.
I see.
All right, so this is your spoiler alert for everybody who doesn't want to get spoiled on Abyss. Let's get into it. So, what are the things that you want to talk about specifically about the spoilers of the game that you really liked?
Oh yeah, going back to storytelling. Basically, what I said about the game doing a good job of putting you into Luke's shoes, I'm going to breach that topic everyone loves to hate or hates to love. Exterius. Because
Oh.
oh my gosh.
uh,
Because for everyone's polarizing opinions on it, I have to say they did a good job of making most, if not all, players feel for Luke in that scene because of how a lot of people tend to interpret it. Because people, like, admittedly, me too, like, I had to rewatch that scene just to make sure that I understood what happened there correctly. But, like, the whole Orewa Warukune scene just has a lot of what do you call this? It's very polarizing.
yes.
Like sometimes in the misinterpretation, sometimes just the player's feelings. Yeah. I think it's a pretty um in my opinion, it's a pretty, for whatever people say, I think it's still a pretty good piece of um writing because of how it makes the players feel. Precisely because of how people like debate about it to this day, and like argue about this is how they feel about it, or they think the party members were off or wrong about doing this, and yeah, the sort of deal. It for I think it's amazing that a scene could be that powerful.
I will say this for the Xerius scene, because of how like it builds up like throughout the games until that point it builds up how much of an ignorant person Luke is. Like you get that sort of impression when you're the player. It's like, how can this guy be like this arrogant and all that? Like I remember when I had that impression too when I played this game initially in 2006. So they had to make something powerful in order to contrast that. And that was the Xerius scene. That was basically the breaking point that we all realized, wait a second, this Atopos that came to fruition gives the player a bit of a mind shift and different perception of Luke. And that was like the entire focus of that scene in order to give that player that feel, which I agree with you that it definitely did establish. And it sort of like builds up to the whole replica thing, but we'll talk about that later. But in upon replaying it, whereas you already have that whole sympathy for Luke, you kind of wonder like about everybody else. Like I see where you're coming from, your appreciation of the scene, but then parts of it that came to mind that sort of like irked me a bit differently when I replayed it was that even Guy was the one who like even was like very what are the words I'm looking for? It's like very dismissive of Luke. And it's like we all know that like he does come back to Luke eventually. He is human, but at that time it just felt like very jarring at that moment considering what the two have gone through up to that point. I understand that it's still like a bit of a confusing point for Guy, but I guess like that's just me nitpicking that particular part because like it felt pretty jarring looking back at it at the moment of that scene.
On my end, my opinion about that is, I another thing I like about Axerius is it highlights how human everyone is. Human in the sense of like among the casts I played through, Abyss has the most flawed cast. Like even though I asked my sister because she's the type of person who tends to what they call this, like really nice characters, a sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
She has a hard time liking anyone in Abyss. Like the closest to her favorite is Guy, who's a nice guy, but even him, he has his kind of jerk moments. And the thing about Abyss is like Xerius for me, like everyone, not only Luke, was making some sort of mistake over there. It's not only Luke that's like out of it in that scene. Everyone was like, I guess the word I would use probably is stressed in a sense. Like no one there is, I mean, it's given like the stress of the situation, like what the heck they all just went through. I mean, I can hardly, I mean, they were jerks.
Yes.
Yeah, they were jerks about the thing. That's kind of hard to deny. Yeah, but um, I would say that, I mean, if you think about like the context of the scenario in general, you could see why they acted that way. It doesn't necessarily make them right, but like let's say Jade, the main reason why this was also explained later in another scene, like the reason why he kind of acted that way in post Xerius is because Luke's denial of responsibility reminded him of how he was as a kid with Nebulim, and I guess that scarred him more than the fact that Luke actually blew up Xerius. And for Annis, I think it's kind of ties into her. spoiler, being a spy for the order and type of deal. Guy, I think it ties into his revenge thing about when his initial revenge plot type of deal. Maybe seeing Luke like that kind of reminded him, oh, this is why I hate your family, the sort of deal.
Right, right, right.
And Natalia busy clinging on to her, past impression of Luke. It's like, oh my God, was this the guy I was gonna get married to? No freaking way. The sort of deal. And then there's Tyr. I guess he's just really fed up because Luke had been acting like, the an ambassador with an emphasis on ass
Wow.
because
Wow. Okay.
before before the whole thing blew up. So yeah, everyone was just really tired and stressed, and oh God, shit is probably blowing up above ground. We gotta get back. And then there's someone here acting like a spoiled brat. Oh, oh gosh. It's just, yeah. Basically, TLDR, um, everyone wasn't really acting themselves in a sense. I'm not sure if that's the term I would use, but suffice to say, um, a way to highlight their flaws in a sense.
I see, I see. Man, I feel like we can definitely talk more about Exarius because Exarius and the other connections to it because there's just something I want to like bring up about like Jade in particular because we know that Jade knew at the time, right?
Yes.
So it kind of like his was like his reaction felt a little bit I don't know.
Hypocritical?
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't want to
Yeah.
like spill it out there because like not only that, but he also knew that he was still trying to like get like Luke was still trying to get things together, and the fact that it happened, like I kind of feel like Jade might have been able to have prevented that in a sense. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, I think a lot of them could have prevented it in the sense like I remember Ion felt a little guilty about it too because shortly after it happened, yes, and Jade knows the script so to speak,
Yes, he does
but
know the damn script. Freaking conniving bastard.
yeah, yeah, yes, I think I didn't. It's kind of debatable. If he was also considering that fact that what do you call this? He knows he could have prevented it. But I do know that later on in the game, it's very much implied he had regrets about not speaking up when he could, because his main reason for not speaking up was because it was too troublesome.
Too troublesome.
Yes, it was too troublesome because, if he's told everyone, like, hey, Luke might be a replica or whatever, or what, or maybe we shouldn't be so trusting of blah blah blah, the sort of deal. He found I can't remember where I read that, but I'm pretty certain of that he found it just like in Japanese very mendokusai, just to explain things, because if he explained like, hey, Luke, you might be a replica, the sort of deal. He's gonna have to explain, why do you know that? And maybe because I invented the science, and I kind of and Luke's symptoms kind of reminded me of how a newborn replica would be, and we all know like how sore he is about his past. So I get he didn't want to get into that, so he said nothing at all.
All right. I feel like we may save this discussion for another topic altogether because there's a lot of potency here. But
Yes.
long story short, any closing remarks with regards to Abyss being one of your favorites?
Oh my gosh, we kind of basically. Oh my gosh, we took just took up a lot of time. But anyway,
Now you see what I mean.
but yeah, basically, like a serious aside, the way the party dynamics changed throughout the story, like for me, that was a very touching aspect of the story, which I really loved. Like one of the relationships that really stuck out to me was Jade and Luke's relationship. Like in the beginning, they found each. Well, Luke found Jade like the annoying, conniving bastard who didn't really make sense because it's like he was making fun of me, that sort of kind of deal. And then Jade just didn't really care about Luke. He's like, we can use him for our goals. That's it. I'll bear with this, spoiled little brat, the sort of deal. But at the end of the story, they like they genuinely care about each other as friends, and it's really really kind of heartbreaking how they reach that level in terms of their relationship. It's a very complicated teacher student relationship, to say the least of it, and that's one of the things that I really loved about the game, because it's also a way to like because it's probably no secret that Jade is my favorite character. Seeing him interact with Luke is a very good way of seeing how human he can be. Like most of the time, he just presents that very cool front and unaffected front. But when it comes to Luke, especially towards the end of the story, he gets a lot more emotional. Like as emotional as Jade Curtis can be, but um,
Right, right.
yes, he gets plenty of, well, pardon the word again, feels when it comes to Luke.
Sentimental.
Yes, okay, sentimental. Yeah, that's a better word, I guess. And yeah, in terms of closing remarks, yeah, Jade is also a big part of why I love Tales of the Abyss. I mean, I talked about this to Rich off the record a long time ago, but he has this charm that no other character I find in the Tales of series can bring. Like, there's a reason for me, maybe it's me being biased, but like a crossover game is never complete without Jade doing his thing in there. Like he has this unique combination of like snark, info dumper, and um like high authority figure sort of deal. Like he's very what do you call this? Insertable into any scene. Like if you just need a quick dash of humor or someone to like explain shit, even though he doesn't like explain shit. But yeah, TLDR of why I like Jade basically, because I can go on and on about the topic.
Yes, I feel like we may need to save that for another time because there's it feels like there's definitely more that we can talk about with regards to business specifics. Um, but with that said as well, since we're gonna wrap things up here real quick because we both worked on the whole Tales of the Theater sub. Um, just want to talk about that real quick. Thanks everybody for just watching it all together and whatnot, because we were very happy to like work on that and bring that out to all of you. So I'm very happy that everybody enjoyed the little piece there. I just felt like it was another one of those shorts. Like I already provided my thoughts in on the weigh-in, but it was just like another one of those like shorts that were just like, oh well, it's like another Bamco produced skit in animation format. But I'm glad that everybody that watched the subs really enjoyed it, but it definitely reminded me how much like how how busy it is when it comes to producing a sub. That's for sure.
Oh yes, it was quite a ride that week. We were working on it, but it was a fun ride, and I really enjoyed well working on it with you guys.
So with that said, you can follow me on Twitter at PamBamRichard, or Twitch on PamBamRichard as well, where I am like nearing the end of Tales of Berseria, it looks like. And to those who are curious, it got to the point where Laphicet sort of like stands up for himself and yells at Velvet. So to those of you who have played Berseria, you guys know what that point is. I do hope to share my thoughts about that game at a different time. But for Slip yourself, anything that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, besides the usual, I'm on Tumblr and Twitter with the handle Dimension Slip. Oh, I'm going to Tales of Natsumatsuri, well, for the foreseeable week because it's kind of convenient for me to drop by. So if you have any item requests, I have a proxy post up on my Tumblr right now. So feel free to shoot me an email in case there's some merchandise you want me to grab or whatever.
All right, and to those who have tuned in, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care.